Sen- SENS began hosting an environmental all candidates forum in 2015 out of necessity. Before that time, most of the forums in the area were hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, and the evenings rarely, if ever, discussed environmental issues. We now know that environmental issues affect business, but they also affect our health, our food security, our infrastructure, forestry, water, affordability, and a lot more. Everyone's lives have been impacted by fires and floods, droughts and heat domes. We hope that by hosting these forums, we can inform voters of the positions of our candidates on these very important issues. So I'm going to turn you over to our moderator, John Corbett. Dr. John Corbett lives in Vernon, but works at the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus, where he is the head of the Department of Community, Culture and Global Studies. SENS would like to thank Dr. Corbett for agreeing to moderate this forum tonight. Thanks, John.
Jane, thank you so much. Firstly, welcome everyone. It's so nice to have you all here. Um, I was actually pulling up a map just earlier of the reworked boundaries of the Vernon Lake Country Monarchy riding and seeing that we really cover an enormous area from Vernon through Lumbee, Cherryville, Fauquier, Burton, Edgewood, where in fact I know some people are joining us today, right the way out to Silverton, Slocan, and Windlaw. So it's so nice to have such a wide embrace and such an interesting set of geographies throughout our province. I mean, I can't help but think we are absolutely blessed to live in really one of the most beautiful parts of the world, and particularly like one of the most beautiful parts of the world here in the Lake Country Monarchy Vernon area. So it's so nice to have everyone here. So nice to have people from the Kootenays joining us. Um, Before I get going, though, I want to firstly acknowledge that partially the beauty, of fact, a large part of the beauty of the area that we live in is due to the long and close stewardship of the First Nations communities that have existed on this land for generations, that have come before us, the Syilx Okanagan people, the Tanaka, the Sinixt, as well as the Secwepemc people. So I just want to acknowledge them before we start. And if many of you have been reading the newspapers these days, there's a lot of controversy within our university around land acknowledgements. But for us, I think it's a really important thing to continue to affirm, the recognition of First Nations people through these acknowledgements as we move forward. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. Um, you should know that there were three questions that were asked of all the candidates beforehand. You can access these questions and their answers directly on the SENS website. Mary, who's kind of like our tech backstopper here, is going to put the link up so you can access this if you need to. So this All Candidates Forum, it's really about seeing the candidates' responses to a whole series of different questions which have been constructed both by SENS members, but also questions which have been submitted by members of the public over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then also what I want to do is to invite you, the audience, to also submit your own questions through the chat channels as well. And we will hopefully be able to get to them. Now, the thing is that we don't have a great deal of time, so I'm going to stop yammering on as soon as possible. So I want to just apologize in advance if if we're not actually able to ask your particular questions of the candidates. So now instructions for the candidates. What we're going to do is we're going to first of all start off with a quick 5-minute introduction. Introduce yourselves to us. Tell us about yourselves and tell us why you decided to actually run in this election. And then once we've got that out of the way, we'll move into our question period. I'm going to read out a particular question, and then I'll give you each the opportunity for 2 minutes to respond to that particular question. I'm going to try and shake it up a bit so that we don't always work through the same sort of the same order of people. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. Now, at 2 minutes, what will happen? Cue Jane. Jane will have this wonderful animation which basically will warn you that your 2 minutes are up. Jane? Go and do your thing. Oh my goodness, here we go. As you can see, we're a well-oiled machine here in SENS tonight. And so
Yeah.
Jane will have this wonderful thing which tell you, oh my God, yes, indeed, I've got to wrap this up. And then you're going to have 15 seconds. And after 15 seconds, if you hadn't finished, then Jane's going to give you a really stern warning. Okay. And nobody wants that. That'll be really, really serious. And then at the end of the question period, we're going to have 2 minutes. Everybody will have the opportunity to just like wrap things up and make a closing statement. So, just again, a couple of quick housekeeping things. Of course, this is going to be a civil discourse. No disrespectful language, sounds, behavior from the candidates or from the audience. If we do see any form of disrespect, then what will happen is that we will actually remove you from this forum. That's the joy of doing it on Zoom. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our candidates and then we're going to start with their 5 minute introduction. So, first of all, we have Leah Main, who's joining us from Silverton and representing Canada's New Democrats. Secondly, we have Anna Warwick Sears, who's representing the Liberal Party of Canada. And thirdly, we have Blair Vischer, who is representing the Green Party of Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. The fourth candidate in our riding is Scott Anderson from the Conservative Party. Sadly, he can't make it tonight, but he did send the following note. Thank you for the offer. Unfortunately, we have to decline as we're scheduled elsewhere. And he's also declined at this moment to give written answers to those three pre-forum questions, but there's still plenty of opportunity, obviously, to do that before the election. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to the three candidates that are joining us tonight in the same order that I introduced them. We'll start with Leah, you'll have 5 minutes, then Anna, you'll have 5 minutes, and then Blair, you will have 5 minutes to introduce yourselves and tell us why you wanted to run in the selection. Leah.
Thank you. Um, I'll give you a very quick little bio and then a bit of talk about my motivations. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I immigrated to Canada in 1967 at the height of the Vietnam War. I was involved at that time with the civil rights movement as well as the anti-war movement. So I have been political for many, 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 many years. I also really value being a Canadian, coming from a place that I felt was going to go off the rails pretty soon, and coming to Canada that gave me a great welcome. Um, I cherish it. I value it. Um, I moved variously to Montreal and then Vancouver and then up the coast of British Columbia and then into the interior, all the while unlearning my urban habits and learning rural habits. I have lived in Silverton area since 1971. I raised my son here. I live here with my partner. We met playing music. I haven't always been a professional politician. I've served 15 years as a counselor for the village of Silverton, 11 years on the regional district of Central Kootenay, and spent 10 years as an elected member of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, where I had the opportunity at least once, usually 3 or 4 times a year, to go to Ottawa and work with our federal counterparts to develop programs that would be delivered through local governments. Local governments are the government of proximity. We are the people who live with you in your community. During that time, I also got involved with a number of environmental challenges, logging, mining, water protection, living in a small rural area, small rural town. Those things become very important and they also become very personal. And so when you're demonstrating against logging, for example, the person driving that logging truck is your neighbor. So we all had to learn a whole bunch of skills around environmental activism. And it led me eventually to doing quite a bit of citizen science under the tutelage of people such as Colleen and Wayne McCrory and Lorna Visser, who developed a number of programs through the Valhalla Wilderness Society and the Slocan Lake Stewardship Society. So my credentials are on the ground credentials from being involved with what affects my community, my region, my province, and my nation. Um, it's what we do when we live in Canada. Canada is a small enough country that an individual's efforts really are noticed and do have an impact. So that gives you a bit of a sense of where I'm coming from. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, Leah. Anna, you're next.
Hi, everybody. Good to see so many old friends on here. I also, like Leah, moved to the Kootenays in 1971. I was 6 years old, and we moved up from the United States. So I am also a dual citizen. Grew up on Kootenay Lake, graduated from high school in Argenta. Um, and for the last 19 years, I've been living in the Okanagan as the executive director of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. So what that involves, it's not just being a water nerd. Like Leah, it involves a lot of working directly with local communities. So the board itself is made up of mayors. There's Okanagan Nation seat on it. It's the link. We joined together to work on all the different interjurisdictional water issues in the valley. So climate change, I've been involved in all the climate change work in the last 19 years, working on wetlands restoration, flood mapping, drought planning, fisheries restoration directly with the Okanagan Nation. I've also recently been working on international water issues for the last 10 years with the International Osoyoos Lake Board of Control under the Boundary Waters Treaty, and more recently with the Skagit Environmental Endowment Commission. It's a watershed just to the west of Manning Park. Both of those boards have equal numbers of American and Canadian board members on them. So that's been a real eye-opener and a lot of discussion for this current time. I am running right now and I'm running for the Liberals right now because I am extremely concerned with Canadian sovereignty. I feel extremely upset by what's going on with Donald Trump trying to strangle our economy and pressure us into compliance for whatever he wishes to do with Canada, Greenland, and the Arctic. I did not feel like I could just sit by and watch this happen. And when I was invited to step up, I had to step up. And the thing about sovereignty is that everything that we're doing depends on it. Everything to do with our Canadian approach to environmental protection depends on our sovereignty. Because if you look down south, what's happening is that they are tearing up the EPA, they're privatizing the National Weather Service. They are closing down or constricting the National Marine Fisheries Service. It's like all these things that have to do with environmental regulation and protection are being just hammered and gutted right now. And we cannot let that happen in Canada. So also, if you're concerned about a woman's right to choose or multiculturalism or education or social services, those things are also under attack in the United States. And if you're a person who's very focused on economics, our economic self-determination is another reason that you should really be concerned about sovereignty, because we can't have somebody from another country telling us who we can have trading partners with, how we manage resources, what we invest in. If we don't have sovereignty, we don't have anything. And that is why I'm here, bring my whole self, my environmental background, my love of Canada, all the work that I've done with communities over the past 19 years to stand for you as your Liberal candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Blair, you're next.
Hi, thanks, John. My name is Blair Vischer. I'm the Green Party candidate. I'm joining you today from Edgewood and the beautiful forest. So I actually am, I was born in BC. I'm from the Kootenay area, and I live in Lumbee, BC. I work in Vernon. I'm doing graduate research in Lake Country, so I get to see a lot of this incredible region um, every day. And so one of the main reasons that I felt it was really important to run is I've been working on the Green Party board for the last year, but I've been a Green Party member for many years. And it felt like it was really important to have some more choice, especially given that there's just so much framing around the idea that there really can be only two choices. That really unsettled me, thinking what's happening in the United States right now, I think in large part is due to a two-party system. And here in Canada, we have the luck, the commitment to not be a two-party system. So I felt that it was really important that we have choice for our voters in our area on the ballot. And I also really feel like we have seen a lot from our two main parties. And it just felt really important to me to bring forward other options, especially living in this area, working as a school teacher, creating food security initiatives here. I really notice climate change as inseparable from the challenges our region is facing, with our record-breaking wildfires and our prolonged droughts and our erratic weather patterns that are devastating farms and threatening our way of life. It's so important right now for everybody to band together and to stand up for what we have in Vernon Lake Country Monashee area. I think it is incredibly important to have people in government in all levels who are really accessible, that we can talk to, that we get to see often, and who really are a part of our community. So I just feel really honored to be representing the Green Party. We have a lot of policies, obviously specifically for climate change and climate adaptation and mitigation. And we also have a lot of really great policies for Canadian security. So yeah, I'm really honored to be a part of all of that. My research that I'm doing right now is in misinformation and disinformation spreading on social media during wildfire crises here in the Okanagan and also in the Shuswap. So I also feel really strongly that the way in which governments communicate really needs to be looked at, because misinformation continues to spread, and it is causing some real danger in communities. So that's my focus of research right now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you, all three of you. And Blair, you said a word which I think is really important. You said that you were honored to serve. And I just wanted to add that we're also honored to have all three of you standing as candidates. It's a brave thing to do, and we really appreciate you for doing it. So thank you to the three of you. Okay, so and also to others, I see that Corey's joined us, and I also wanted to reach out to Scott as well. So the first question. This way we will do it. Leah, you will answer first. Blair, you will answer second, and Anna, you will answer third. Okay? And I'll try and shake it up a bit. Okay, so the first question. 14 of Canada's biggest oil and gas corporations, which enjoyed record production levels and healthy profits in the last year, have asked the federal government to, firstly, abandon the levy on the industry's carbon pollution. Secondly, do away with the promised cap on planet warming emissions. And thirdly, ensure new projects get approved within 6 months. Would you and/or your party support any or all three of these requests? Which ones and why or why not? Would you like me to read out those three again one more time?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one, abandon the levy on the industry's carbon pollution. Secondly, do away with the promised cap on planet warming emissions. And thirdly, ensure that new projects get approved within 6 months.
Ah, well, I can say unequivocally that the New Democratic Party and I, as a representative of that party, would support none of those demands. Any or all of those demands just push the climate crisis closer and closer, more rapidly to the tipping point that we are teetering on already. Um, having having eliminated the consumer carbon tax, what we're left with is the industry carbon tax, which is woefully too small. We also give all sorts of money to the gas and oil industries, and that money should be actually used to make individual households, families, living situations more better and less carbon heavy. We need to be supporting people to switch to lower carbon energy consumption. And these three demands from the oil industry are just ways of prolonging the heavy use of carbon-laden energy inputs. So the New Democratic Party would not accede to any of these demands. We would use the funds that are supporting the oil industry right now, including that $43 billion to build the pipeline. We would use it to support families and communities that are trying to move to a more carbon neutral style of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Blair.
Yeah, similarly, the Green Party would support none of these. Essentially, what the oil and gas corporations are asking is for individual Canadians to take on the responsibility for all of the climate damage that they're creating and to subsidize them. We already heavily subsidize them, which seems like a strange idea, given that if we were to follow capitalist market theory, if they're a profitable business, they should not be receiving government subsidies. So the Green Party really believes that these oil and gas corporations are responsible for the damages that they cause. And any of these requests for the federal government to make sure that it's easier for them to not have correct permitting, to not follow any of the current laws when it comes to emissions, doesn't make any sense. Yeah, similarly, the Green Party has a policy as well to stop the subsidies. Taxpayers should not be paying for large oil and gas corporations. And that those subsidies would immediately go to helping people with the cost of living crisis that we have right now. We need to invest in clean technologies, and we need to transition away from something that's actively harming our environment and causing all of these very serious and very real events that we see, like wildfires and droughts. So no, we would not support any of these.
Thank you, Blair. Anna.
Although I am running for the Liberal Party, I agree that major industrial polluters should not be off the hook. The Liberal Party, actually, the new Carney's new plan is to shift the burden of the carbon tax onto large-scale industrial polluters. That's a major part of the plan. We find ourselves in this weird position where we're under this existential threat, and we're trying to separate ourselves from our largest trading partner. There is part of the clean energy transition includes oil and gas, but it is by no way shifting the burden of GHG reduction onto local communities and local families. In fact, there is going to be a lot more incentives for local families to retrofit their homes, put in heat pumps. We're bringing back the electric car subsidies, purchase subsidies. There's a lot of things that are going to be focused on local communities, local businesses, local families in order to take some of that burden off of them while shifting it more onto the industrial users. And the increase in the speed of their permitting will only happen if there's some kind of intense national security issue that is related to the United States. So that's my understanding of where the Liberals are coming from on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Our second question. Renewable energy solutions are a great way that we can build a stronger, more resilient, and more independent Canadian economy. We cannot control global oil and gas prices and markets, and we already have renewable solutions for when the sun does not shine or the wind does not blow, such as interconnecting grids, diversified renewables, energy storage, and energy efficiency. Additionally, by creating more green jobs, we can create stable and localized employment that helps us get off the oil and gas dependency. How will your party manage a transition away from oil and gas? Will it A, increase investment, including subsidies and incentives in reliable renewable energy instead of or in addition to oil and gas? Will it B, build a resilient east-west electrical power grid instead of or in addition to oil and gas pipelines? And C, provide support for oil and gas workers transitioning into the renewable energy sector. So if you need to, you'll see that the question is written in its entirety in the chat section. So this time we will start with you, Anna, and then we will go to Blair second and Leah third.
Okay. I don't want to get distracted by looking at it in the chat, actually. So I'm like a huge green energy transmission fanatic. Transition fanatic. I am extremely keen on the possibilities that are out there right now, and I'm keen on the platform that the Liberal Party has for heavy investment in green technologies. So it's a big part of his energy program. One of the things that I'm most excited about is the East-West grid. Those of you who are following the energy transition in the US know that it's really slowed down by problems with the grid. Somebody from the PemboNet Institute once told me that Alberta and Saskatchewan are potentially the Saudi Arabia of solar and wind power.
Oh.
And the way that you really take advantage of that is you link those intermittent sources of energy with, for example, those great big hydro dams that we have in British Columbia. And that's made possible by having a much more robust grid that runs east-west. You know, you have Ontario and Quebec contributing hydro. You have solar and wind everywhere that it's practical to have them. And you have the whole thing linked up so we can all take advantage Canada-wide of all these different possible energy sources that we have. That in addition to all the other types of energy storage that people are working on right now. So there is a lot in there in the platform, and I'm excited to see it go forward when Mark Carney forms government in the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Blair.
Yeah, so the Green Party has really robust plans for ending fossil fuel projects and investing in clean energy and jobs. So a primary factor of our security policy and in ensuring that Canadians who are currently working in the oil and gas industry have and continue to have well-paying jobs that they're proud of, and can still participate and use their expertise is helping to transition into a clean energy field. We have so many people in Canada who are so capable and trained in these ways. So that's something that is really exciting for us. We definitely want to increase investment in reliable, renewable energy. We really do need to be increasing our investment in these technologies. Currently, while here in BC we have a lot of hydroelectricity, we are also essentially at capacity with the electricity that we create. So in terms of a east-west grid, not only do we need to create the grid, we have to actually look at new technologies and creating those. So it's a massive project and something that we need to start right away.
Thank you, Blair. Leah.
Yeah. So, not to overstate the obvious, all three of the parties represented here tonight have been and still are talking about an east-west clean energy electric grid. The New Democrats are also looking at the more northern and isolated communities that are outside of that laneway. It would not be very easy to include them in this east-west grid concept, but we are looking at them as well and want to assist them to move away from diesel-powered generators to make electricity for their communities and start utilizing better green technologies. But I want to take it down a little notch from there. Having admitted that the three of us have very similar policies behind us, for the last 7 years, on the Regional District of Central Kootenay, I was the chair of the Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee. And one of our big mandates was to look at alternate forms of energy, alternate ways of powering our communities. And we looked at, pellet stoves, Hilton wheels, everything in between, and most recently did a geothermal pilot project on the eastern shore of Kootenay Lake, and determined that we actually are in an area of high geothermal activity. And the second phase of that pilot project is to capture that geothermal energy and use it to heat our greenhouses. So we would be addressing food security at the same time that we're looking at dealing with energy security. I know I got a little bit off the quad of your 4 questions, but I wanted to give an example.
Thanks so much, Leah. And you got the beautiful fluttering clocks for the first time as well. A question from the audience, and obviously it's really relevant, and also I think it speaks a little bit to sort of the diversity within our now much larger riding as well. And the question is, I'm wondering what the candidates would say are the most important environmental issues in our local area, from Vernon through to Fauquier, and I'm going to say, and onward to Winlaw and Slocan. Why are they important, and what would they advocate for to address them? So I'm going to read that one more time. I'm wondering what the candidates would say are the most important environmental issues in our local area, from Vernon through to Fauquier. Why are they important, and how will you advocate to address them? This time we're going to start with Blair, and then we're going to do Anna, and then we're going to do, oh no, we're going to do Blair, then Leah, then Anna. Hard to keep a track on this. So Blair, starting with you.
Yeah, thank you. That is a great question. I really think that the biggest climate related issue affecting our area is fire. We've all been affected by fire in this area, whether by being evacuated, having our houses burned down, or just having the smoke. I know, I have friends who work in the tourism industry, and they run small businesses, and they're impacted very financially. I have other friends in the winery community, and they're deeply impacted. So these climate crises are not future threats. They're our current reality in this area. We continue to struggle with these unpredictable frost cycles also in the agriculture industry. So this local climate crisis is really important for us to address immediately, and we really do need federal government to be part of this, because though it's a local issue that we face, the cause is not local. So the Green Party recommends that we should have an investment into community-based climate readiness. These things are not something that we should continue to just be reacting to. We need to be planning for these significant events. How can we better prepare our communities? And how can we ensure that we already have systems set up to assist farmers, to assist small business owners, and to address the health impacts? So that's really, I think, the most important for me.
Thank you, Blair. Leah, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Fire, flood, and drought, food security, and the unpredictability of what is coming at us. I was evacuated last summer from, my whole town was evacuated. And I have very clear memories of driving up Red Mountain Road, which is just outside of Silverton, to rescue my son's truck and guitars from his house that was surrounded by fire. He was working away. Being a musical family, there was no way I was going to let his guitars go up in flames. So I did that, and it was like coming face to face with no way of turning away from it. One of the things that we can do, that we will do as federal New Democrats, that we are already doing in the province of British Columbia that has a new Democratic government, is the Emergency and Disaster Management Act, which helps prepare communities, helps them recover, and helps them build resilience in ways that also reinforce better climate practices by doing all of the things that we know we should be doing, changing how we use energy, changing the energy that we use, protecting our communities by better forest practices. And these things also ensure that people will have more reliable jobs, that when they go to work in the morning, their job is going to be there because it hasn't burned to the ground or hasn't been flooded out, or their farm is not burned to a crisp under the sun in a drought. We know what we have to do, and the new Democratic government will help individuals do it.
Thank you, Leah. Anna.
I 100% agree with my fellow panelists. It's really comes to climate impacts, fire, as we've heard, floods, landslides. We had a landslide on the west side last week. The droughts, trying to balance the needs of water for the agriculture along with the fish flows, is a really big deal. As Blair said, the unseasonal weather that is really harming the crops, heat, air quality, all of these things are really hammering our communities. When I was asked to testify to the House of Commons Special Committee on Infrastructure, I was this was a big point of mine. Like, most of the funding goes to Eastern Canada, and I was talking to him about, like, okay, fair enough. The bulk of the population is there. But if we have these massive, expensive things that are happening to our communities, whether it's a giant drought or particularly a massive forest fire or floods like we saw in Merritt and Princeton and the Lower Mainland in 21. Those things are hugely expensive, and you know who pays for it? The people in Ontario and Quebec, where the bulk of the population is. If the government, what the government needs to do is to help us in advance work on climate adaptation, whether it's, fixing our roads, getting people out of the floodplain, or working on things like we have going on right now with the Aberdeen Plateau, where the communities of Vernon and Lake Country are working with the Okanagan Indian Band to change how the forests are managed in order to protect our drinking water infrastructure. So that's a huge thing that specifically has to do with climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I'm really glad that you ended on that point talking about water. And I'm going to do this order now. That Anna, you'll answer this first. Blair, you'll be Blair, I think you're going to have to be second, and then Leah, you're going to be third. And I'm going to ask you a couple of water questions, one of which has come from the chat and the other which has come from beforehand. So the Okanagan Valley is a bioregion that's experiencing both water quantity issues and water quality issues. From the international, we're facing threats of demands to our water from south of the border, to the local. So the question that's come from the chat is, Liberals have not managed to provide clean drinking water for all Canadians, especially Indigenous people, over the last 9 years, despite promises made. Water is important to all Valley residents. Do Liberals from the East really care? So the question is, to minimize future water problems, what policies and practices would you advocate for?
Could you say that again, John?
So to minimize future water problems, what policies and practices would you advocate for?
Well, you're talking about those things on a variety of spatial scales. So one of the biggest issues right now in the broader water community right now is this issue of Trump potentially wanting to mess with the Great Lakes and doing boundary adjustments. Like that is, there's some tremendous international threats that are happening right now. Getting his hands into the Boundary Waters Treaty. So at that scale, the number one thing is to deal with Trump directly and strongly and not allowing any policies of appeasement. On the much finer grain scale, every community is working on providing drinking water. These large and mid-sized communities, they have drinking water treatment plants. So with changing climate, like here in Greater Vernon, they're having to put in a new filtration system at great cost to the taxpayers because the blue-green algae is coming up far greater amount than it ever did related to the warming of the lake. So we're going to have to expand and change how we deal with water on that kind of municipal water provider scale. And then when you have small communities on small community water sources, it's much more complicated. It's because every source is unique and different. Some communities do not like to chlorinate their local water systems. In some cases, you definitely are going to have to support individual families to have treatment right at the source of their system because there's really no practical way to get clean water to everyone if you have something, for example, like a contaminated well. So from the great macro to the home, it's going to require investment for sure and diligence on the part internationally.
Excellent. Well, thank you for spanning those scales so adeptly. Blair, you're next.
Yeah, this is a great question. Thank you. So to minimize future water problems, I think we really do need to invest into our water and water security for all communities. As we know here, we have a lot of water. However, it's also a challenge to make sure it's clean, to make sure that the water use is being shared in a way that is best for everybody. So I really think the key here is we need more investment. We need more assistance to make sure that we are able to adapt our water facilities, to make sure that the water is safe for people to be drinking, to make sure that we are taking care of our beautiful lakes and rivers, to make sure that farmers have access to water when they need it. So really, it's a diverse amount of issues, as Anna has said. However, I do think the key is investment. And I think that, we have seen, you're correct, that the Liberals haven't been able to effectively address this with significant amount of time as the formal government here. So I find that concerning. I think that everybody should have access to clean water here in Canada. It's really important, and it should be a priority.
Thank you, Blair. Leah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to preface this answer by saying most of climate adaptation and resilience work is done and has to be done in rural areas. The problems may be putatively caused by the great concentration of populations in the big cities, but the only place where we're going to solve these problems is out in the country. Protection of water, not just drinking water, but water, period. It goes, as Anna mentioned, the scale and the scope is enormous and it's minuscule. So what we can do in our rural communities is rejuvenate, restore, and protect wetlands, is observe what's being done down in Washington and Oregon about removing dams. We have a lot of dams that could be looked at in that fashion, restoring the ancient waterways. Forestry practices need to change. Forestry has ruined so many watercourses by simply ignoring them and falling trees over them and then driving bulldozers through them. Those forestry practices have enormous consequences to our water supply. The other things we need to be doing is looking at our aquifers, mapping the aquifers accurately, and not fracking them, for one thing. So we have all sorts of things that we can and should be doing on all sorts of scales, from the macro to the minuscule, to protecting one wetland and by stopping fracking. So the water question is just huge.
Thank you, Leah. I'm going to carry on with water, though, for a little bit. And here I would like Blair to answer first, Anna second, and Leah, you will be... No, why, Leah, you should be second, Anna, you'll be third. And next time you'll be first, Leah. Remind me
Okay.
there. Okay, so, and this is another question coming from our audience. Another local water-related question. Small and medium-scale hydroelectricity has had a long history in the rural Kootenays. In fact, Sandon is home to the last remaining independent run of river hydroelectric station in the region, producing clean power since 1898 and feeding the electricity into the BC grid since 2002, benefiting nearby communities like New Denver and Silverton. Before the 1960s, every community in our region generated its own power. Given today's push for clean, renewable, and decentralized energy, what would you and your party do to support small communities in re-establishing local run-of-the-river hydroelectric generation and empower them to produce, manage, and even profit from their own renewable energy? Would also like to extend an invite to all the candidates to come and tour our historic hydroelectric station in Sandon. Well, it's pretty close for you, Leah, but it might be further away for others. So basically, let me just reiterate that final question. So, given today's push for clean, renewable, and decentralized energy, what will you and your party do to support small communities in re-establishing local run-of-the-river hydroelectric generation and empower them, love that word, to produce, manage, and even profit from their own renewable resource? Blair.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is such an interesting question. I really like this idea of communities having some agency over their own power. I think that's an excellent idea, and it has worked really well in Sandon. I would say I'm certainly open, and I think that governments at all levels need to be open to this kind of out of the box thinking, while also ensuring that we protect our rivers and the ecosystems around them in appropriate ways. But I think that yeah, having more agency on a local level is a great idea. Um, Again, something that I feel really strongly about is that we should feel that who represents us on a federal level should really be accessible on a local level for exactly this kind of thinking. Yeah.
Thank you, Blair. I think Anna, you were next, and then you, Leah, were third, right? Is that how I was going to do it?
Whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what you're gonna do.
Okay.
So I also am a big fan of small hydro, like from mini hydro up to the scale that they have in Sandon. I believe Nelson has its own Nelson hydropower, and when I was living in Argenta, they called it Elliott Power, a small plant that powered about 10 homes and a big community freezer. So yeah, I think it's a terrific idea when you have more regionalized sources of electrical energy. It actually makes the local grid much more robust
Yeah.
and less inclined towards failures. It's a super good idea. One cool thing is that the province of British Columbia and BC Hydro, maybe the provincial government is kind of leaning on BC Hydro to do this, but I don't know. I don't want to start rumors, but to have much more focus on run-of-the-river hydro where it's actually possible. Here in the Okanagan, and a lot of people have asked me about this over the years, there's only one that I know of for sure, and that is where the District of Lake Country put a turbine on the outflow from its reservoir and captures enough electricity to help run the water treatment plant. But generally, the flows in the Okanagan are too low to be able to really create enough hydro to make it worth it. But I think in parts of the Kootenays where it's much wetter, it's a great idea. And like I said, the more that we can distribute energy production, the better it is for all of us. And as Blair said earlier, we're going to need a lot more electricity. So where we can get it, we need it without causing environmental harm like some forms of hydro production can do.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna. Leah, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Vida. I think this was your question. Vida is part of the Sandon Power generation, which is, it's a fantastic operation that generates power without doing a whole bunch of environmental harm. As a counselor on Village of Silverton Council a number of years ago, I instigated us to look into producing our own power off of Silverton Creek. It turns out that very few creeks in the area actually have enough flow throughout the year to make that viable without harming fish habitat. Enterprise Creek was the closest creek that we could have looked at using, and there were water licenses already held on it. So that was, unfortunately, it stopped us in our tracks. For a period of time, about 15 years ago, the province of BC was encouraging run-of-the-river and tying their power production into the grid, and then they ceased that program by changing the way they paid for the power and made it financially impossible. I have some friends in the Slocan Lake area who got caught in that episode. The province and the federal government needs to become much more consistent in how they treat small power operators. We need to be looking at a distributed grid rather than a centralized grid that everything has to go back to BC Hydro. We need a distributed grid, a net of power generation using run-of-the-river hydro and all sorts of other power generation. So I see the alarm clocks going up, so I will rein in my enthusiasm and let someone else speak to the next question.
Thank you, Leah. I love that. And I love the idea of community freezers as well. Okay, so the next question. And then we're going to do this, Leah, you can go first this time. Anna, you can go third, and Blair, you can go second. How about that? Okay, so will you and your party increase Indigenous-led conservation of protected areas in Canada to advance reconciliation and protect nature? Leah.
We can succeed at nothing without learning from the Indigenous neighbors, the people that we live with, who have the communities and the knowledge keepers that have expertise going back millennia. And we are ignoring that knowledge. Without that knowledge and without the cooperation, actual truth and reconciliation, a bit of humility, and the ability to learn from First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, they already know how to steward the planet without destroying it. And we need to learn from them. And we need to do that with a big dose of humility. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
It's me. I'm second, I think.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the honor of one of the main courses that I've taught as a teacher in the area is BC First Peoples and BC First Peoples English, which is a new mandatory teaching at the high school level about the history of the first peoples who were here. And now in my research, I've also gotten to work with some Silks Okanagan people and really had very deep learning from a Silks elder that I'm so grateful for. So there is so much knowledge and a deep feeling of responsibility to the land among our Indigenous community members that I really think we need to learn from. I'm so grateful that they are willing to teach us these things. And the Green Party is really hoping to work closely with all Indigenous communities who want to work with us. And yeah, we need to do so much more than what we're doing in terms of relationship building, but also assisting First Nations and Inuit peoples to have the ability to make their own choices on their sovereign territory.
Thank you, Blair. Anna.
Yeah, totally agree with Leah and Blair. There is so much to be learned by our Indigenous neighbors. One of the most exciting projects that I have been involved in my career is seeing the restoration of the salmon to the Okanagan system. The latest project that they're doing is coming up with a real good fish bypass around the Penticton Dam. There was a fish ladder, but it was too small, and now they're putting in this great big fish bypass so that these great big ocean-going sockeye and Chinook can swim up into Okanagan Lake and access all the tributaries up here. So that is a super exciting project. We've been involved with, when I say we, the water board has been involved with it by helping them with in-stream flow science and stream flow monitoring, and yeah, just working as partners and supporting them. But a lot of that funding has come from federal sources, from the Liberal government. There has been a huge support from the Department of Fisheries Oceans over that time. So it's really like working as a partnership with the Indigenous nations. Mark Carney, one of the first things that he's done in this campaign is really come out very strongly for Arctic sovereignty and giving the Arctic peoples, you know, not just to say, but sovereignty in the North. So that is exciting. Another thing I would say about it, I was just reading today on some of the platform. Part of the platform is to enshrine First Nations right of water into law. So that's going to make a really big difference in terms of how First Nations knowledge can actually be applied in wetland restoration and other things that require a lot of water. So I've seen the clocks, but it's a great question. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And increasingly fire management as well. Appreciate that. Okay, then my next question is going to be about the Youth Climate Corps. So, Blair, I'd like you to go first this time, and Anna for you to go second, and Leah for you to go third. So, the Youth Climate Corps is a program that aims to empower young people to address the climate crisis by providing them with opportunities to gain skills, earn a living wage, and contribute to climate action initiatives. Will you support an initial commitment of $1 billion to create a Youth Climate Corps and 20,000 full-time jobs?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. This is a key part of the Green Party plan. So the idea is to mobilize young people across all of our regions to help with fire mitigation, watershed restoration, and regenerative agriculture projects that could improve soil health and help with drought resistance. So that can be funded by not paying public money into fossil fuel companies, but rather investing in our youth while also investing in climate resilience and community resilience. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Blair. Simple answer. Anna, were you next? I think you were.
I can't remember, but yeah, maybe. This comes back to that discussion that I had with the House of Commons committee, and it's about how we can reduce the risk of climate impacts to our communities by investing in having groups like the Climate Corps come in and help communities make changes in order to make us more climate resilient. I know that I'm not familiar with what's going on in the other communities within the riding, but I know that the city of Vernon is going to be getting 5 kids this summer, 5 members of the Climate Corps, which is exciting. And the city's coming up with different ways for them to be put right to work. I think it's a great idea. There's it's like the Peace Corps, you know, there's so much to be learned by the young people, and there's so much to be gained by the communities. So I think it's a terrific project and very inspiring. Thank you.
I think it's my turn. And absolutely the
I'm muted. Sorry about that. Yes, Leah, your turn.
You were looking very thoughtful.
Yeah, I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah. The NDP absolutely supports this concept, but I must say that developing that knowledge and that skills starts way before that, starts in kindergarten, where environmental stewardship needs to be part of our children's education, so that by the time they are of age to participate in a climate core, they will already have a bunch of information, a bunch of knowledge, and a bunch of skills for that as well. So I'm looking at this from a rural and small town perspective, because this is how we raise our children in the Kootenays. They go on camping trips, they go on survival courses, they go on 7-day bike trips as part of their schooling. And so they have a leg up over perhaps city kids who don't get exposed to those kinds of experiences, which I think is really important in developing the awareness and the skills and the physical skills for doing it. It's also needs to be combined with in Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous climate core that anytime we talk about going out onto the land, we are going out onto somebody's land. And there's a very deep understanding of that in the NDP policies and programs that we're proposing to implement, and the climate core with an Indigenous integration in it is definitely part of the vision.
Thank you so much, Leah. The next question, and I've got a much better system now. Mary said, "Hey, you got to start writing this down." So I started writing this down. So right now, and in this next round, Anna, you're going to go first. Leah, you're going to go second, and Blair, you're going to go third. Okay. And if you forget your number, I've got it written down, so I'll be able to remember for you this time. Okay, so will you and your party support legislation that safeguards biodiversity and protects and restores intact forests, which play an indispensable role as carbon sinks and in reducing climate impacts like droughts and flooding? If you don't, why not? And if you do, how do you think this should be done? In other words, do you support legislation that safeguards biodiversity and protects and restores intact forests? Anna, you're first.
Okay, well, it's a good thing I was looking at this part of the platform this afternoon, because the Mark Carney's plan is actually includes implementing the global biodiversity framework and conserving 30% of Canada's lands and waters by 2030. So he's taking it very seriously. It's one of the top parts of the strategy for Canada's nature, biodiversity, and water. It's right there at the top of the platform. So there is a lot of other stuff having to do with increasing the amount of national park area. There's also an interesting one that you would like, John, that has to do with mapping out Canada's carbon and biodiversity rich ecological landscapes in order to better protect them and to better take a holistic ecosystem approach to the conservation by better understanding the mapping. So it's a very core part of the Liberals' nature platform. Includes biodiversity, and someone who studied biology for way too many years, I'm really, really stoked about it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Anna. Nice to see your enthusiasm. Leah, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Anna, you presented your platform very, very succinctly, very nicely. And I must say that the New Democrats have very similar outlook on the preservation of intact forests and on preservation of the boreal forest as well, which is where most of the petroleum work is going on. And there are big pock marks on the formerly untouched boreal forest. And that is of great concern. That is one type of intact forest that does need to be preserved, as well as the other old growth forests in the interior rain belt, of which the Kootenays are part, and we have several pockets of intact old growth forest, and the New Democratic Party is committed to preserving them and not giving them up to other resource recovery efforts. So it's really a vital part of how we propose to convene and govern this great country of ours and participate in the governance of this country by protecting the natural resources, beginning with the forests and the water, because you can't have one without the other. So thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Blair, you're next.
Yeah, we would definitely support legislation safeguarding biodiversity, protecting and restoring intact forests. I think that the Liberal plan of 30% is excellent. We would advocate for more. But it's a good start. I do also want to raise the idea of an intact forest. What does that look like? What does that mean? As we see in wildfire research, wildfires caused by climate change and weather patterns changing, but it's also caused by the idea that leaving a forest alone is what is best for it, when for time immemorial, we have actually seen like indigenous stewardship of those spaces. So those forests weren't just isolated and by themselves, and nature wasn't really removed from humans. So I really see that as an incredible opportunity for us to understand that we as human beings have a real role in these intact forest systems. And we have a lot of learning to do from Indigenous Canadians. And we need to also have legislation that acknowledges those aspects as well.
Thank you, Blair. I'm thinking we've got time for a couple of questions, so a couple more questions before we wrap up. So the first question, again, comes from the audience. And the second question also addresses some of the chat that's actually going on right now within the audience as well. So the first question, and we're going to answer this, Leah, you'll be first. Blair, you'll be second. And Anna, you'll be third. So the question is, can the candidates describe what their parties and local regional transportation, what their parties' local and regional transportation strategies are or should be in the short and medium terms?
Okay. There is no doubt in the minds of many, including the NDP party, that regional networks of transportation are urgently needed, and that we build out from those so that each region connects with other regions as well. But even beyond that, it is imperative that we support a high-speed rail network from coast to coast to coast. Right now, unless you drive or can afford to fly, you just can't get there from here. And I have experienced this over the last 10 years of working with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and visiting Halifax, Dorval, Yellowknife. The ways that we get around are really need improvement. And I was fortunate enough in being able to bring a resolution to the FCM board to begin working with the federal government, which at the time was Liberal government, to address this transportation issue of once Greyhound abandoned Canada, we are really stuck, and we are really stuck in using high carbon transportation. So this is a central part of the NDP transportation policy, is to look at that high-speed rail and the regionalization of networks using public transportation.
Thank you, Leah. Blair, you're next.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Leah. I think we do need to shift toward creating more opportunity for more people to access public transportation. It's one of my big passions in our area. Living in Lumbee, I know that trying to take the bus to get to Vernon or Lake Country feels very inaccessible. And yet I know people who do it every day. And it does inhibit the kind of jobs that you can take, the kind of shopping that you can do. So maybe you can't access the cheaper groceries because you just can't get out there when the times work. So I think this is really important, not just for our own cost of living and quality of life, but also to help us with our climate adaptation. If we had accessible public transportation that really worked for us, I think a lot more people would be able to choose not driving in individual cars. So yeah, I think it's really important. I think the federal government needs to, again, really prioritize this as a climate adaptation strategy, and to assist us with the cost of living and our quality of life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm next. Yeah, big fan of public transportation. This really became clear to me when I had a elderly friend in Caslow who was talking about how difficult it is to get to the hospital or doctor's appointments in Trail and Nelson, rural communities. You know, the roads are so dangerous in the winter and there's always people going off the roads. Buses are one of the safest forms of transportation. And also, as we see in northern British Columbia, they're also very important for personal safety for women who don't have any other way of transportation except for hitchhiking. It's kind of, you know, just makes you shake your head when you think about uh, how we need this kind of system. The other thing I would say with respect to climate and environment and buses is that buses are going to be one of the easiest things to electrify because you can go from point to point, the major fast charging systems for the buses. So I totally agree with Leah and Blair. Regional is going to be super important. I think one of the things that's been contemplated with the big, they call it a infrastructure corridor in Canada, is to expand rail lines, because one thing about rail, in addition to being a really fantastic way to travel, it's also in many ways a less expensive, lower energy form of moving, you know, whatever kind of goods that you have, minerals, wood, what have you. So grain. So I'd love to see a renaissance of the rail system in Canada, and you know, imagine what we could have if we had rail out to Vancouver too. I don't like to drive there in the winter anymore because it's too frightening, and the bus, you know, there's just not that much bus service. So totally agree with my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Anna. And I'm glad you ended on that point. Totally agree with your panelists. There's been an awful lot of agreement through this entire extremely civil discussion, which brings me on to my final question, and it's been a lot of dialogue in the chat about. And it's really a two-part question, and it's about our electoral system and our election coming up. So, given that research shows countries with proportional representation have more effective and long-lasting climate policies, do you support proportional representation? And if so, what would you do to help implement electoral reform? And that is back on back with the second question, part of this question, for all three of you tonight. Given that vote splitting is a real concern in this election, in the previous provincial election, etc., for all that care about environmental regulations, how do you justify running against the other two left or progressive candidates on this forum this evening? So, Blair, you're first, Anna, you're second, Leah, you're third. Proportional representation, vote splitting.
Yeah, so the Green Party really strongly has come out for proportional representation. The numbers show if we had a proportionally representative government, that we wouldn't see the majorities of either liberal or conservative that we see. And more Canadians would feel like their vote actually mattered, right? And I think it was a really big letdown when Justin Trudeau campaigned on proportional representation, and then never carried on with that pledge. And I think likely that's because with proportional representation, Liberals would not receive the kind of backing that they do currently, which sort of leads me into this idea of vote splitting. So for one, and someone mentioned it in the chat, Michael, I think, shout out Michael, that, we are not a two-party system. We are democratic in that we get a lot of choice here in Canada. And I think the percentage of the vote that we're worried about splitting is very small. So in our last federal election, only 30% of people who could vote in this area did vote. So what I would really say is that rather than being concerned that we can't vote for our values and for who we want to see in government, we should maybe consider inviting more people in, trying to get the word out that your vote really does matter. Every person has the power to choose what they hope for Canada's future, and you don't have to just choose out of fear for what you don't want.
Thank you, Blair. Leah, you're next. Sorry, Anna, you're next.
Yeah, personally, as an individual, I do support proportional representation depending on the form that it takes, because some forms are better than others, and I would still like to be sure that the proportional representation did not just be electing people at large, but having the representatives still closely tied to their community. I think that that's really important. With respect to the vote splitting, I completely agree with Blair that the responsibility is on each of us to get more of the vote out. We need to have more people taking their vote seriously and coming and expressing themselves in this way. It's an important part of democracy. That being said, Mark Carney will be forming government, and I think the choice is really ours, the people on this call, me, our neighbors, on whether or not you want to have a representative in government. And I think, far be it from me to tell anybody how to cast their vote. But what I do want to say is that if I am chosen as the representative, I want to point out how much commonality we have here on this panel, how much commonality we have as individuals, how we share so many of the same values. A lot of my work has always been focused on narrowing in on what we share. It doesn't matter what our party is, but what we all really care about, and focusing on that if we're working toward change. Because I think a lot of change is possible if we're keeping an eye on the things that are most important to all of us. So if I am chosen as your representative, I would pledge and promise to keep a dialogue open with NDP people, Green people, Conservative people, and take being a representative of all the citizens very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And finally, Leah.
Thank you. It is a central theme of the NDP that we are not a two-party system. We are a multi-party system. And that in order to support that, we desperately need proportional representation. We could argue all night over the details of exactly what that would look like and how many points go here and how many points go there. That is not what this is about. This is about understanding that a multi-party system is a healthy democracy and that it requires proportional representation to support it. Yes, the three of us find agreement in many, many ways. Where we disagree is how we vote, how we cast our votes in Canada. And I find it just tremendously important to represent not the conservatives versus the liberals and then the liberals versus the conservatives over and over and over again. It is just too important to recognize that we have more than two voices, more than a dichotomy, more than a bi system. It is a multiplicity, a multitude, and it requires proportional representation in some form to support it. It is important to me to be able to represent the people that I know in this part of the riding who have historically been NDP voters. And I see people in conflict with themselves over, do I vote what I believe or do I bet on a horse that I think is going to win? Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you. Excellent answers. We have got about 3 minutes left. So what I would like would be for each of you just to have 1 minute to order to wrap this up, present clearly what it is that you will do when you're elected, and just to give some closure to this forum. Anna, you will go first. Leah, you will be second, and Blair, you will be third. So starting with you, Anna, just to wrap up with 1 minute. One.
Thank you, John. I am completely committed to working for the communities, rural and urban, in this particular riding. My friends in the Kootenays, my friends up and down the Okanagan and through the Monashee. We can do this. We can beat this conservative guy if we join together and we get the vote out. It's all possible. And I ask you to join me. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Leah, you're second.
Thank you. When I am elected your MP, I will represent all parts of this riding that takes over 7 hours to drive from one end to the next. I will do my absolute utmost best to represent all of the needs, all of the desires, all of the points of view, all of the different communities that live in this wonderful part of the world, in this wonderful part of Canada, where we are fortunate to have these types of choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Blair.
Yeah, thanks. So to finish off, I just want to really say Vernon, Lake Country, Monashee, our area is so significantly impacted by all of the climate shifts happening right now. I really think it's time to vote for somebody who's going to advocate for significant change in our area right now, not later, not when the research is done after 10 years. We need change right now for support. So I would advocate for that if I were to be elected. And I really want us to deeply consider, are we happy with what the Liberals have done, or are we just afraid of what the Conservatives might do? And if you really want change, it's time to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. My goodness, we've done well. We're absolutely on time here. So this ends our SENS All Candidates Forum. I would like to say thank you so much to these three candidates for coming out and giving us their time and sharing their values and sharing their ideas with us this evening. I am so supportive of all three of you, and if any one of you were elected as my MP, I would be the most deeply happy human being. So thank you to the three of you. Thank you for your commitment to the country. Thank you for your commitment to your community. I really appreciate you enormously. Thank you also to the audience for coming out and giving us your evening here on a Friday to learn about these important topics. Democracy thrives with informed voters. Thank you. Thanks also to Jane for doing such a wonderful job on the timekeeping. Also Mary Stockdale, that's beside me here, who's been doing a lot of the answering on the chat. Janet Parkins, Julia Lasau, Heather Miller, Marissa Lassau, whole bunch of people, sort of the cast of thousands behind us. I want to say that there's 3 more all candidates meetings coming up in our riding. We've got the Slocan all candidates meeting, which will be in Slocan Legion on Monday, the 14th of April. We've got the Vernon All Candidates Forum going to be in the Vernon Chamber of Commerce, Thursday, April the 17th. We've got the Lumbee All Candidates Forum, which is going to be in the Lumbee Chamber of Commerce, Tuesday, April the 22nd. But the most important thing, obviously so clearly articulated by these 3 people, is you've got to get out and vote. Oh my God, there's so many opportunities to vote. You can advance vote from Friday next week onwards, but please get out there and vote because that is what makes our community strong. So thanks to everyone for being with us this evening. I hope you all have the most wonderful weekend and that the weather's beautiful because my God, we live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. So thank you, everyone. Really, what a joy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
To everybody.
Great.
Thanks for this opportunity. Have a
Thank
nice
you, Leah.
evening.
Look forward to meeting you in person, eh?
Yes, absolutely. I'll be back in on that side of the riding in about 5 days.
Perfect. Well, you come if you need a place to stay or you need to come around and have a cup of tea, you're always welcome, eh?
Would love to.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
And thanks, John. You were very well behaved.
Well, you definitely set the tone.
Thank you all.
And Blair, we're going to have that meeting one day, right?
Yeah.
Yes, one day.
All right,
Bye.
everyone. Good. Have a wonderful
Bye,
weekend.
everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.